Okay, so our format tonight is the same. We're going to do the grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure in our first part, and then we're going to do basic reading comprehension, and then we're going to do vocabulary, and then we're going to do etymology. So let's begin. Albino redwoods. At Henry Cowell State Park in Felton, California, a waxy white bush leans against the majestic trunk of a 500-year-old 20-story tall coastal redwood tree. The bush is distinctive. It has an unusual incandescence and only stands about 4 feet tall. So if you look at question one, this is a complete sentence. The bush is distinctive. This is a complete sentence. It has an unusual incandescence and only stands about 4 feet tall. They're separating two sentences by a comma, which you can't do. That's a run-on sentence. So this punctuation is incorrect. Now, you can have a semicolon here. A semicolon connects two complete sentences that are closely related. So these two sentences are closely related because they both refer to the appearance. So a semicolon here would be fine. You also could put a period and a capital I and make them two separate sentences. So let's go over here and look. No change is clearly wrong. Because as it is here, it's wrong. Distinctive, comma, it has an unusual incandescence, comma, that doesn't solve the problem. Distinctive, semicolon, it has an unusual incandescence and only stands 4 feet tall. So here you go. This is the semicolon. This is incorrect because you do need to either put a period here and start a new sentence or put a semicolon. So the only right answer here is C. So the answer to one is C. Okay, let's move on. Surprisingly, though the bush is almost genetically identical to the enormous redwood that dwarfs it, the bush dash, a rare botanical anomaly dash, is an albino coastal redwood. Okay, so you have a dash before and after a parenthetical phrase. So the bush, this specific phrase refers directly to the bush. When you have something like this that is cordoned off, it needs to be symmetric. Whatever you put before it has to come after it. You could potentially put a parentheses here and a parentheses here. A dash and a dash would be okay. So we want to look at what the other choices are, okay? The bush, a rare botanical anomaly. So this doesn't separate the phrase from bush, and there needs to be a separation here. The bush, comma, a rare botanical anomaly, dash, this is not symmetric. Here you have a comma and here you have a dash, so that's incorrect. The bush, dash, a rare botanical anomaly is, again, you have to cordon off on both sides. So the only answer that gives you that symmetrical cordoning off of the phrase that refers back to bush is no change. It's correct the way it stands. So the answer to 2 would be F, no change. Okay, let's move on to our next, let's see, I'm trying to get this to move. There we go. These exceptional shrubs lack the most essential plant characteristic, colon, this is what the characteristic is, the ability to produce chlorophyll, comma, which absorbs light most strongly in the blue portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, question 3. The writer is considering deleting the following clause from the preceding sentence, adjusting the punctuation as needed. This clause, which absorbs light most strongly in the blue portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, this phrase, this clause right here, is considering deleting it. Given that the information is accurate, should the writer make this deletion? Yes, because the information is implied by the information in the previous paragraph. No, it's not. It's not implied. Yes, because the information is irrelevant to the scope and focus of the paragraph. Okay. All you need to know is that this albino plant doesn't make chlorophyll. And without chlorophyll, it cannot perform photosynthesis. You do not need to know the detail about what type of light the chlorophyll uses. Although it's true, it's not relevant to the subject matter of the paragraph. It's excess information that distracts from the flow of the paragraph. So the right answer to 3 is B. Yes, because the information, though true, is irrelevant to the scope and focus of the paragraph. You don't need to know this in order to follow the reasoning. So the right answer to 3 is B. Okay. Without chlorophyll, photosynthesis cannot occur, comma, leaving albino coastal redwoods without a means of producing its own food. Okay, redwoods is plural, so the possessive has to be plural. So you go over here and find the plural possessive. The only one that works is there, of producing their own food. So G is the correct answer to number 4. Okay, without a means of producing their own food. Contrastingly, now this is a connecting phrase, right? Contrastingly, in order to survive, these plants become parasites. Now, the question is this the right word? Okay, they can't make their own food. Consequently, because of that, in light of that, contrastingly, it doesn't make any sense because you're continuing the same idea. They can't make their own food, so they have to become parasites. So there's no contrast there. It's just a continuation. So you need to find something here that shows a continuation of the idea that they're dependent. They can't make their own food. So no change is wrong. Accordingly, that makes sense. They can't make their own food. So accordingly, in order to survive, they must become parasites. Okay, that makes sense. Similarly, makes no sense because you're not saying the same thing. Can't make their food, then you're continuing the thought by saying they have to be parasites. It's not a similar thought. It's a thought that's in accordance. So this is wrong. Besides is clearly wrong. Okay. They can't make their own food, and besides that, they become parasites. No, it's not besides, it's because of that. So the only right answer here is by B, accordingly. So change this word to accordingly. In order to survive, these plants become parasites, latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods to tap into their nutrients. So latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods is a dependent clause. It's an ing clause. It cannot stand as an independent sentence. This has to be a comma, and this has to be a small l, because it's part of the sentence, the previous expression. These plants become parasites, comma, latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods to tap into their nutrients. So this is clearly wrong. Let's go over here and find it, comma, there it is, latching. This is these dependent clause. So the right answer to 6 is H. Okay. So comma, latching onto the roots of nearby redwoods to tap into their nutrients, period. During periods of drought, that's mean when it doesn't rain, comma, albino redwoods often wither and enter a dormant state. Entering a state, introducing a state, invading a state, accessing a state being here a condition. You enter into a condition, okay? The dormant condition. You don't introduce into a condition, you do not invade into a condition, and you do not access into a condition, you enter into a condition. So this is correct. So 7 should be A, no change. They wither and enter a dormant state, period. Later, comma, during periods of heavy rainfall, comma, this is correct, right? This phrase should be cordoned off by commas. They resurrect back to life and latch on to their hosts. Resurrecting itself means coming back to life. So if you resurrect, you shouldn't say back to life because you're repeating yourself. You could say resurrect and latch, okay? But this is redundant. You're saying the same thing twice. So let's see what you got here. Resurrect in reanimation, again, redundant. Reanimation is coming back to life. Resurrect is coming back to life. This is redundant. Revive to life, again, redundant. They revive, that's enough. They revive and latch. But you don't have to say revive to life. You're being redundant. Oh, here we go. Revive and latch back onto their hosts. revive and latch back. So here you don't have a repetition of that idea of resurrection or reviving. So the only right answer to 8 would be J. Okay. Now we move on. Although these plants may seem like little more than botanical leeches, leeches being bloodsuckers that are parasites, comma, they're actually a testament from the tree's remarkable genetics and adaptability. A testament is made to something. It's giving you a word or giving evidence of something. Okay, so you give testament to something. Okay, like when you testify in court, you testify to certain events or testify to the truth or falsehood of something. So you don't testify from, you testify to. So if we look at 9, although these plants may seem like little more than botanical leeches, given that all the choices are accurate, which one most effectively leads the reader from the preceding paragraph to the new paragraph? And the answer to number 9, okay, is no change. And I'll tell you why. The plants are sucking onto the redwoods to get their nutrients, which would make them seem like botanical, meaning plant leeches, parasites. But they're much better than that. They're much more interesting than that. They're not just parasites. They're a testament to the tree's remarkable genetics and adaptability. So this is a nice transition from the previous paragraph, which talks about latching on and feeding off of another tree. They're not just parasites, they're a testament to the tree's remarkable genetics. So the right answer here is no change, A, to 9. And 10, the right answer is 2. It's a testament to the tree's remarkable genetics and adaptability. So 10 would then be H. Coastal redwoods have 6 pairs of chromosomes. This allows them an extraordinary degree of genetic diversity. Every time a new coastal redwood sprouts, an abundance of possible genetic mutations can occur. Most of these mutations benefit the tree, such as making it more resistant to fungi or viruses. But on occasion, an albino mutation of the forest can occur, creating this rare phenomenon. Okay, it's not a mutation of the forest, right? It's a mutation of the tree. So clearly, this prepositional phrase of the forest does not belong here. The best placement for the underlined portion of the forest would be where? Where it is now, no, after the word occasion. On occasion of the forest, an albino mutation can occur. That's incorrect. Okay. After the word creating, but on occasion, an albino mutation can occur, creating of the forest this rare phenomenon. Again, that's very awkward. After the word phenomenon and before the period, but on occasion, an albino mutation can occur, creating this rare phenomenon of the forest. So that's where this belongs, because an albino tree, an albino redwood, is a rare phenomenon of the forest, because the forest has regular redwood trees everywhere. And this one is a rare mutation, a rare phenomenon of the total forest of redwood trees. So the right answer to 11 is D, after the word phenomenon. Botanists appraise there are only about 60 albino coastal redwoods in the world. This word should be estimate. When you appraise something, you're measuring its value, not its number. Okay? So this is the wrong word here. So estimate is the right word. Interpret makes no sense. Foresee makes no sense. Botanists estimate there are only about 60 albino coastal redwoods in the world, period. So the right answer to 12 is H. Geneticists are now thinking more or less about the chromosomal makeup of these rare specimens. And what you want here is to emphasize researching the genetics more thoroughly, more deeply. Which choice best to comment? They said delving deeper into, looking haphazardly at, meaning kind of randomly, intermittently looking at it. No, the one that indicates a more thorough evaluation of genetics means delving deeper into. Geneticists are now delving deeper into the chromosomal makeup of these rare specimens. So the right answer to 13 is B. Okay. While scientists are still baffled, confused by what function albino coastal redwoods serve in forests, conservationists continue to advocate for their preservation. This, while you consider it almost a prepositional phrase, but it's a dependent clause. It's not an independent sentence. While scientists are baffled, blah, 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 comma, conservationists continue to advocate for their preservation. So you can't put a period here, or you just have a sentence fragment. So, comma, you don't need an and, so this is wrong. Forests, and that's wrong. Here it is. J. Forests. While scientists are still baffled by what function albino coastal redwoods serve in forests, comma, conservationists, small c, continue to advocate for their preservation. So the right answer to 14 is J. At the very least, comma, albino coastal redwoods are not only a rare phenomenon, but also a stunning illumination of the diversity found in the natural world. An illumination of something, not in something. Okay? Of the diversity found in the natural world. C. So 15 is C. Let's read that. At the very least, albino coastal redwoods are not only a rare phenomenon, but also a stunning illumination of the diversity found in the natural world. So the right answer there is C. Okay, now we'll move on to the long passage and our reading comprehension. This passage is adapted from the book Flower Confidential by Amy Stewart, 2007. Holland and the Netherlands refer to the same country. By the way, don't ever forget this. People get so confused about these countries in Europe. Holland is the Netherlands. The Netherlands are Holland. Okay, so whenever you see a reference to Holland, they're talking about the Netherlands and vice versa. If you memorize that, it'll save you a lot of confusion later in life. I woke up at 5 a.m. and stared at the ceiling of my Amsterdam hotel room. Outside, the canal boats, which were rented to rowdy college students, had just gone quiet. This was a city of late risers. I got dressed and walked gingerly through the lobby, not wanting to wake the innkeeper, who slept on the ground floor, and stepped into the dark, empty streets. The fact is that if you want to go see someone in the flower trade, this is the hour at which you must rise. Even then, when you finally show up at 6 or 7 a.m., blinking in the sudden daylight and trying to remember why you scheduled the meeting in the first place, the person you've gone to meet will look impatient, as though half the day is wasted already. I was on my way to Aalsmeer to see the famous Dutch flower auction. It's known around the world as a remarkably high-tech, high-speed way to sell flowers. But it had modest beginnings. In a cafe outside of Amsterdam in 1911, some growers came up with the idea of holding an auction to give them more control over how their flowers were priced and sold. They called their auction Bloemenlust. It was not long before a competing auction sprang up nearby. The history of flower markets everywhere is that as soon as there is one, there are two. And each day as the auction ended, flowers were piled onto bicycles and boats to be delivered along Holland's narrow canals and even narrower streets. This arrangement continued until 1968, the two auctions thriving nearly side by side until they finally emerged and became what is known today as Bloemenveiling Aalsmeer, the largest of a handful of major flower auctions going on year-round in the Netherlands. So this is the biggest flower auction in the world. The bus to Aalsmeer took me through the shuttered streets of Amsterdam and headed south past the airport. The world seemed to be coming to life at last, and on the road we passed dozens of trucks, some of them plastered with the same grower and wholesaler logos you'd see in Miami. Same grower and wholesaler logos that you'd see in Miami, carrying flowers to and from the auction. This next phase of a flower's life, after it leaves the grower, the farm, and before it settles into a vase on someone's hall table, is remarkable for both its duration and its complexity. A flower can spend a week making its way through a maze of warehouses, airports, auctions, and wholesale markets, and it will emerge from this exhausting journey looking almost as fresh as the day it was picked. So the flower can go through a whole week of traveling and still look fresh. The existence of this auction highlights one major difference between flowers destined for the European market and those sold in the United States. The flowers that I saw arriving in Miami were headed in every direction at once. They were going by truck, rail, and plane to wholesale markets, distribution centers, bouquet makers, retailers, and even directly to customers. There is not a single centralized market for flowers in the United States. But the flowers that come into Schiphol Airport outside of Amsterdam, the major port of entry for European flowers, are almost all going to Aalsmeer. This is the very center of the flower trade, handling most of the flowers sold on the European market and some of the goods going to Russia, China, Japan, and even the United States. The flowers going up for auction come from Kenya, Zimbabwe, Israel, Colombia, Ecuador, and European countries, making this a sort of global stopping off point for most of the industry. Every flower market around the world watches the Dutch auction, which acts as a sort of engine for the trade, setting prices and standards worldwide. If you want to follow a flower to market, you'll end up here eventually. By the time the bus pulled into the large circular driveway at the public entrance to the auction, the day really was half over. Flowers and plants had been arriving since midnight, and bidding started before dawn. I stepped off the bus into a kind of floral rush hour. Trucks roaring past, people racing from one end of the complex to another, the morning sun glaring down. This place is a behemoth, meaning gigantic, in the small town of Aalsmeer. It employs 10,000 people in a town of just 20,000 and occupies almost 450 acres, which is a huge area, an area larger than Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom and Epcot theme parks combined. In fact, the auction is like a city in itself, one that runs 24 hours a day. All the major growers and wholesalers keep an office and maybe a warehouse and a loading dock at Aalsmeer. A full 20% of the cut flowers in the world are sold at this very spot, and about half of the world's cut flower supply moves through the Dutch auction system. So this auction really controls the flower trade in Europe and even other parts of the world. It's a huge operation, and it operates early morning. After midnight, it starts, right? And usually by the time the sun comes up, they're almost done. Which of the following events referred to in the passage happens first chronologically in time? The author wakes at 5 a.m. The students on the canal quiet down. The author's bus passes the Amsterdam airport. Flowers and plants start arriving at the auction. Well, D is correct because they started arriving at midnight. The students didn't calm down until shortly before 5 a.m. She didn't wake up until 5 a.m. and she didn't see the airport until after she got on the bus, which was later than 5 a.m. So the first thing chronologically in order is that the plants started arriving at the auction around midnight while she was sleeping and before the kids quieted down. Okay, so one, the answer is D. The main idea of the first paragraph is that the author is not accustomed to getting up very early. The author is surprised by how quiet Amsterdam is early in the morning. Though Amsterdam in general is made up of late risers, the local flower trade is busiest in the early morning. Because Amsterdam is usually bustling with activity, it is advisable to meet with people in the local flower trade early. So I think that H is the correct one. Okay, if you go back to the paragraph, the first paragraph, she talks about late risers. Outside, the canal boats are done, everything's quiet. It's a city of late risers. I got dressed and I got really quiet because the innkeeper's sleeping. He's a late riser. And the flower trade is the only thing which is early. So the contrast between late risers and the early flower market is really what's emphasized there. So do you need something? What do you need?
Need to meet her for later on.
Oh, okay. The main idea of the first paragraph is that the author, the Amsterdam is made up of late risers, but the local flower trade is busy early in the morning. So the answer to 2 should be H. Okay. 3, the author most strongly suggests that when meeting with a person in the flower trade in the morning, that person will look impatient, just like that, because the day is half over, right? They're like, okay, what took you so long? People in the flower trade are generally late risers. That's wrong. He or she's anxious about wasting time. Yes. He or she can't remember why the meeting was scheduled. People living in Amsterdam are always on the go. So if you look at the passage, by the time you get there, um, let's see, here you go. The person you've gone to meet will look impatient, as if half the day is wasted. So they're anxious about wasting time. So it's right there in the text. So the right answer here, he or she's anxious about wasting time. So the right answer is B to 3. The information between the dashes in line 23 through 25 most strongly suggests that flower markets generally tend to, okay, the information between the dashes, 23 to 25, let's take a look. It was not long before a competing auction sprang up nearby. Dash. The history of flower markets everywhere is that as soon as there is one, comma, there are two, dash. So they always compete, right? There's always one against the other. Function best in small cities, merge if both markets are successful, operate in a competitive atmosphere, suffer when competing vendors appear. So the right answer is they operate in a competitive atmosphere right next to each other, competing. So 4 is H. 5, based on the author's discussion of the exhausting journey, line 45, experienced by flowers sent to auction. Remember, they spend a whole week. The author would most likely agree with the idea that these flowers, remember, they're still fresh, even after a week of traveling, are surprisingly resilient. Yes, they tolerate all that traveling without wilting, are picked last past their prime. No, have remarkably complex biologic needs. There's no mention of that. Should be shipped by plane. It doesn't say that. They're surprisingly resilient. They can withstand the journey over a whole week and still look fresh. So 5, the right answer is A. 6, based on the passage, the main way the US flower market differs from the European flower market is that, remember, in Europe, it was centralized through the Aalsmeer auction, whereas in the US, it's decentralized. Flowers in the United States are usually shipped directly to customers. It doesn't say that. Flowers in the United States are transported by truck, rail, and plane. That's true in Europe too. There are no wholesale flower markets in the United States. No, it doesn't say that. There is no centralized flower market in the United States. Yes, it does say that. Europe has a centralized flower market in Aalsmeer. The US does not. So the right answer to 6 is J. As it is used in line 18, the word modest most nearly means, well, let's look at line 18. It's known around the world as a remarkably high-tech, high-speed way to sell flowers, but it has modest beginnings. Small beginnings, simple beginnings, I guess low scale beginnings, slow beginnings. So something that would mean not complex and not high speed. Bashful, simple, middling, which means average, or decent. So the only right answer is simple. It had simple beginnings. So the right answer to 7 is B. 8, details in the third paragraph, line 33 through 46, indicate that one similarity between the flower industry in the United States and the flower industry in Holland is that both have well-known high-tech flower auctions, are supplied primarily by growers in Europe, doesn't say that, conduct major flower auctions all year long, use some of the same growers and wholesalers. This is the right answer. And the reason this is the right answer, growers and wholesalers, is because when she talks about driving, she says that you can see some of the same growers and wholesalers that you would see in Miami. I'm trying to find out where it is, but She says that Amoed Aalsmeer, famous Dutch flower auction. Okay. Here we go. Some of the same plastered with the same grower and wholesaler logos you'd see in Miami. So they're sharing some growers and wholesalers. And it says it right in the text. So J is the right answer. Okay, use some of the same growers and wholesalers. 9, the author refers to the Magic Kingdom and Epcot theme parks to give you an idea of how big the space is for the Aalsmeer auction. Indicate that the Aalsmeer market is more crowded. Provide support for the idea that the Aalsmeer market is a lot of fun. Suggest that the Aalsmeer market employs many people. Help emphasize the sprawling, the space of the Aalsmeer market. That's the right answer. Takes up as much space as the Disney World and the Epcot Center. Big space. So the right answer to 9 is D. 10, according to the passage, which of the following numbers of flowers is sold at the Aalsmeer auction? 10,000 a day, half of the flowers grown in Holland, 20% of the world's cut flowers, 80% of flowers in the European market. The right answer is 20% of the world's cut flowers. And if you go back to the final paragraph, here it is, 20% of the cut flowers in the world. It says it right in the text. Okay, so that's the right answer, 20% of the world's cut flowers. Okay, now we're going to stop share here. And we're going to share screen and do vocabulary. And there's our vocabulary. Our first word for the night is, and anybody feel free to jump in here and give me definitions, is incandescence. And who knows what incandescence is?
The glowing of a substance.
Yeah, it's an emission of light. It also means, if you use it kind of symbolically, you could say the actress was so beautiful, she had a certain incandescence. She was glowing with beauty. So you could use it kind of artistically, but an incandescent light is a light that glows. Good. Okay, 2, latch. What is it? What is a latch? Or the verb latch?
To fasten or secure.
Yeah, you latch onto something, you attach to something. A remora fish latches onto a shark. Okay. If you use it as a verb, it means to attach or stick to something very fast. But you can also use it as a noun. Close the latch on the door. There, latch is a noun, something that keeps the door closed. It's a latch. So as a verb, it means to attach to something. But if you use it as a noun, it's usually a device that will hold a door or a window shut, a latch. Okay. 3, baffle. What do you think baffle means?
To confuse.
Yeah, to bewilder, to perplex, to confuse, to puzzle. He was baffled by the puzzle. He didn't know what to do with it. You also can use the word baffle as an engineer when you want to restrain or regulate a process. So a baffler will slow down the flow of air through a pipe. But that's a very specialized meaning of baffle. If you become an engineer, you'll use that meaning. But for the common folk, baffle means just to bewilder, confuse, or perplex. Okay, rowdy. What kind of a person is rowdy?
Noisy and disorderly.
Yeah, a rowdy crowd. It usually means they're loud and they're like, moving around a lot, making a lot of noise, shouting maybe. They're rowdy. And usually they refer to college students as being rowdy when they get in a big group. Okay, good. Gingerly. When you do something gingerly, how are you doing it?
Careful.
Very careful, very delicate, very cautious. She approached the aneurysm with her cauterizing forceps very gingerly. So she didn't want to break the blood vessel. So you want a surgeon doing a delicate procedure on your brain to do it gingerly, very carefully, very delicately. Okay, that's a good word. Shuttered, when something is shuttered. Anybody know shuttered?
Like fit with like the windows, kind of.
Yeah, it's like, the shutters over a window, you close the shutters. If the windows are shuttered, that means the shutters are closed, the windows are covered. But you can also use it to refer to a business or a factory. And you can say, oh yeah, that place is shuttered, meaning it's closed. It's out of business, defunct, done. Oh yeah, that factory's shuttered. They stopped making stuff, went out of business, went bankrupt. So that store is shuttered. Okay, so you can use it to literally mean closing something like a window, or you can just refer to a business or a place of operation saying they're no longer doing their whatever it is they were doing, selling or manufacturing. Okay, good. Behemoth. What is a behemoth?
A giant.
Yeah. Behemoth is a huge thing, a huge, enormous, big thing, usually powerful, like a behemoth of a corporation. Like, oh gosh, Apple is a behemoth. It's a behemoth corporation, right? You can also refer to a male African elephant as a behemoth, big, big, or a blue whale is a behemoth, gigantic. Good. And we're going to do etymology on behemoth. I'll show you where that comes from. Foil.
To prevent from succeeding.
Yeah, the police detective foiled the criminal's plans to rob the bank. That prevented it, did something to prevent something wrong from happening. When you foil a plot or you foil a plan that's, something that's wrong, criminal. The other word for foil is a literary term. So if you have a protagonist, a main character in a novel, you might have another character as a foil. And the purpose of that character is to show a personality or certain traits or actions that contrast with the protagonist, offer some kind of a contrast or a stark comparison. So that is a literary term that, that writers sometimes employ. They write about a main character, and then they have another character that's completely different from the main character, and that character is a foil. Okay, so the word foil has two meanings in different contexts. Good to know. Forbearance, show forbearance, and you'll be happy that you did. What does it mean to show forbearance?
Restraint.
Absolutely. Let's somebody provokes you. Let's say somebody at school provokes you, like they're throwing spitballs at you or something, and you could either get really angry and start screaming in front of everyone and basically make a spectacle of yourself, or you could show some forbearance and wait till after class and just tell the teacher. Show some restraint, so some self-control, modulate your own behavior so that you don't act out in stupid ways. That's what forbearance means. Okay, that's a good thing to have. Fortuitous. What is something that is fortuitous?
Happening by accident.
Yeah, by chance, not planned. It was fortuitous that I met Joe on the street on my way to the post office because he had an extra stamp that I needed. Now, here's the little subtlety of fortuitous. It's usually something positive or lucky. So a fortuitous event that occurred by chance, but has some kind of a positive outcome. Okay. How about it was fortuitous that he found the lottery ticket because it was a winning number. Okay. So you can use it as something that just happened by chance, but it has a certain connotation that it's a positive thing. Okay. Now, our two words for etymology, one is gingerly. By the way, both of these words that I picked tonight have unusual etymology. Now, gingerly does come from the Latin, but the word in Latin is genitus, Genitus, genitus. And what it means is well born, born into an aristocratic family, born into a wealthy family with land and palaces and servants. So that's where the word is in Latin. Then it goes to Old French, and it changes from genitus to gent, Gent, or as they say in French, gent. And the meaning changed from well-born or aristocratic to graceful. So the word gent in Old French became graceful. Then in Middle French, the word became Genson, Jensen, or Henson, which meant delicate. So we went from well-born to graceful to delicate. And then in English, it became gingerly, which meant carefully, cautiously. So the word went from Latin, well-born, to graceful, to delicate, to careful. It really transformed its meaning through 3 different languages over 2,000 years. The next one we're going to do is behemoth. Now, behemoth does not start out in Latin. It actually starts out in Hebrew. And the first place where you see the word behemoth is in the book of Job in the Old Testament. And in the book of Job, there's a passage which talks about a behemoth, a powerful grass-eating, river-dwelling beast with bones like pipes and limbs like iron bars. And I actually looked it up in the Bible, and it does say that. It has bones like pipes and limbs like iron bars. And biblical scholars have speculated that they're referring to the hippopotamus because it was such a big animal and so strong, and it lived in the river. So they called it river dwelling. But from the Hebrew, the Old Testament Hebrew, it was adapted into Latin, and the Latin meaning became an awful, horrible beast, something scary and monstrous, a behemoth. And then from Latin, it went through Old English, Middle English, into modern English, and the horrible part disappeared. And it just became something gigantic, a behemoth. You could refer to a behemoth as a corporation, a car, a person, an elephant, something gigantic. But that negative, monstrous connotation to the word, that kind of went away. So a behemoth doesn't necessarily have to be a scary, horrible monster. It can just be something that's really big. But the origin of behemoth was the Old Hebrew from the book of Job in the Old Testament. And then it was adapted into Latin. Okay? So those are your 2 words for tonight, gingerly and behemoth. And I think that's it for tonight, guys. Anybody have any questions? Okay, well, this was an interesting session. We will be back next week. And if you can, try to review these vocabulary words, memorize them, and use them in a sentence so that you really commit them to memory. So, 3 months from now, if someone says to you, what does gingerly mean? You're going to know exactly what it means. And you might even use it in one of your essays. Okay? All right, guys, thanks very much. And have a good week. I'll see you next week.